Good evening and welcome to Catholic Peekskill. I am Father John Higgins, your host for this public access television show. So glad you could join us. Thanks for being with us. In this program, we try to meet the challenge of the Church to use modern means of communication, especially as we're here in Peekskill, our beloved city of 25,000 people, in which the Catholic Church has had a long history. I'm very honored to be the pastor of the one Roman Catholic Church in Peekskill, Assumption Church. And in a special way, I feel very happy to have with us as a guest someone who I knew since I was a teenager, since my first day of college. Father Joseph Levine was actually my next door neighbor. I entered Thomas Aquinas College in Santa Paula, California as a freshman in September of 1986. And in the very room next door was a young man named Joseph Levine. And his roommate also later was to become a priest. So among the 4 people that lived in these 2 rooms in the college campus of the 400 dorm, 3 priests. And I'm very excited to welcome Father Levine. He's a priest of the Diocese of Baker, Oregon. And he joins us from some vacation to be with us here in New York, here at Peekskill, staying a few days with us. And a very warm welcome to you, Father Levine.
Thank you very much.
It's good to have you here. Maybe so that our viewers could learn a little bit about the background, maybe you could tell us a little bit about your family and your vocation.
Okay, well, I've told you before, how I come from a very secular background, okay? People often ask, Father Levine, that's really kind of strange, isn't it? Isn't supposed to be Rabbi Levine? But it's, my father's side of the family has a Jewish heritage, but I had no religious upbringing from either side of the family, and was baptized at age 20, and then spent some time in the Coast Guard, met you at Thomas Aquinas College after I was already there a year, and after a long roundabout journey, finally, I was actually only ordained to the priesthood almost 6 years ago now.
6 years
so
ago.
I'm really still just a baby priest.
Yeah, and tell our viewers, what is your role now? How do you serve as a priest in Oregon?
So I'm in a diocese that is very large in territory, okay? The Baker Diocese is all of Oregon, east of the Cascade Crest, okay? From Cascade Crest to the Snake River and the Idaho border, from the California border to the Washington border. The size of that, just that diocese, which isn't even all of Oregon, is bigger than any state east of the Mississippi, except I think Michigan.
Really?
Okay?
Wow.
But I don't know how many people there are. I think there are more cows than there are people in the diocese. But I remember it's like 38,000 Catholics, about 36 active priests in 32 parishes, I think. So most of the parishes just have 1 priest. There are a handful of parishes that have 2 priests.
Wow.
Parishes are, think about that number of parishes in that larger space. They're spread out. And the nearest parish to me, I have one tiny parish which doesn't have a priest resident there, is about 19 miles away.
Wow.
It's serviced by a priest from another parish that's about 25 miles away or 30 miles away. And then there's a parish, I'm at St. Peter Catholic Church in the Dalles, Oregon, which is right on the Columbia River at the east end of the Columbia Gorge. It's actually a very historic place. It's a Land's End of the Oregon Trail. And I think it's been there longer than Catholic Church here in Peekskill, maybe. I'm not sure, because it goes back to 1848.
Yes.
There wasn't much else there, but it goes back to 1848.
Wow, you're right.
But as I say, the nearest parish downriver to me is still in the diocese, is 20 miles downriver.
So it's very separated one from another by geographical distances.
Yeah. Now that means the people don't like the priest. They have a hard time going, running away to another parish.
Can't jump to somewhere
else.
Else.
They do it. I hear there are people that don't like how long I preach for, and so they'll drive 20 minutes to avoid an extra 5 minutes in the homily.
So yes, I guess it's worth it for them. But you know, when you came here to Peeks, this is not your first time. We've visited before, as you've come here to Peekskill before some years back, and obviously there's some very big differences. Peekskill has 25,000 people in it, and you said in your whole diocese there's only
38,000 Catholics. As I don't know what the population of the diocese is, but it's not a very heavily Catholic area, so say maybe 300, 400,000 people, in the whole diocese. It might be a wild guess there.
Now, we've talked about some similarities. There's a lot of the big differences. You're in the wild, wild west there in Oregon. What similarities have you noticed between your parish of St. Peter's and Assumption and Peekskill?
Well, there's the physical similarity. Okay,
the age as well, right?
Well, is that Assumption is Peekskill is on the Great East Coast River.
Yes.
Upriver from the metropolis.
That's right.
And St. Peter's is on the Great West Coast River. Upriver, well, you can't call it a metropolis in comparison with New York, but it's what passes for that in that neck of the woods.
Got it.
But then also the demographic is, your parish, I've been here this weekend, your parish is much larger. But the demographic, you have, I think you said predominantly people from Ecuador and as far as the Hispanic portion. But our parish is 60%, my guess is about 60% of the adult population is Hispanic, entirely from Mexican origin, with one exception.
Wow.
And then I'd say 90% of the children are from Spanish-speaking households. So, I have 3 weekend masses: a Saturday evening mass in English, Sunday morning mass in English, and a noon mass in Spanish. And in, you might say, the peak times of the year, the noon mass can be pretty packed.
And it's all you. You have to do both. Do you speak Spanish?
I try to.
Yes. When I remember, you were very good at Latin when we were in college.
Yeah, but I never spoke Latin.
Yes, that's a.
It's
we knew it as
a whole different
language.
world when you're trying to speak a language.
Yeah. How long have you been pastor there at St. Peter's?
So just about 4 years.
Yeah.
We have a parish school with 160 students, and I finished the 4th school year, but I actually didn't arrive in the parish till August, so it was a little.
How was your school doing? As you know, our Assumption School in Peekskill sadly closed in 2013.
That was sad news. We're struggling, but right now we're making it, and it looks maybe we can keep going. We need to find some creative ways to bring in students, and especially the challenge is bringing in some of the Hispanic families and making it affordable for the Hispanic families.
It's a great challenge.
Yeah.
If you said 90% of the youth or the children of your parish are from Spanish-speaking households, they would be the ones who would go to the
because we have enough children in the parish to fill the school. But
can they afford the tuition?
Can they afford the tuition? Yeah.
That's always the great challenge, and I wish you the best in those efforts. I remember you said something that really affected me shortly after your ordination 6 years ago, and you had the experience of the first time being in a confessional. We have very traditional confessionals at Assumption Church. We have the confessional
That's
rooms.
the ones you put me in, but
and you also have the one with the screens. And I remember you said that sitting in the confessional, something I actually quoted here on an episode of Catholic Peekskill, sitting in the confessional is like being in the Sacred Heart of Jesus.
Yeah. In my first experience there, my first parish was in Central Oregon in Bend, St. Francis of Assisi Catholic Church there, and they have a new church, but then old church downtown is like here. They had traditional confessionals with a screen, and you sat in there, and you had one. I guess they'd close it off, so you had all of one side rather than coming in from both sides. But you're just in this little wooden box, and everything was very brown and dark, and sort of and warm, and but there was actually once I saw this icon of the Sacred Heart of Jesus. It was very fascinating, and it speaks to this because actually he had a very severe face. Some people thought the icon was really scary because he had such a severe face. But then in Greek style, it didn't have a nice red heart. It had a circle in the chest representing the heart. And the circle, there was a throne with the Blessed Virgin on the throne holding the child Jesus.
Wow.
Okay. And then there was this priest. There's an Oriental monk, an Eastern monk priest, right? And he had his stall, which they have you see the Eastern icons with all the little crosses, all the crosses, his white stall, all these crosses. And he was reaching out of the heart with the stall. And there was then, outside the heart, you saw this poor sinner, reaching up, and he was pulling the poor sinner into the heart with the stall.
Beautiful. Is that what you feel like?
Yeah, I think that's a really tremendous image for what goes on in the sacrament of confession, what a priest is doing, and what all of us, since we all have to, go to confession and get pulled back into our Lord's heart.
Both as we go there as penitents and we go there as confessors as well.
Yeah.
What do you like best about being a priest?
What do I like best? I say the most amazing and most awesome thing is celebrating Mass.
What's that like? I could.
You tell me what it's like. You've been doing it longer.
20 years now. But,
it is, and both Mass and confession. They're two really amazing things. In confession, you really have that privileged position. It's almost like being at the switching station of grace, where you see grace at work touching individual lives. So you don't see that at the altar at Mass.
True.
But at the altar at Mass, you're there in, I don't know, words fail. So many years I'd gone to Mass and participated in the Mass from the point of view of congregation. I served as a deacon at the side of the priest. And always, when a deacon at the side of the priest, always very conscious, there's this mystery there that I'm outside of yet. I can't just, I couldn't just step over, the priest isn't here, I'll just go and do it myself. No, I can't do that. You're ridiculous. I'm so close, but, you're so far at the same time, right? And then being there at the altar, giving your hands and your lips to Christ, and He comes always anew, and you're part of that, and it's not just the switching station of grace. This is the big, in the Dalles we have a big hydroelectric dam there. Oh. So this is the big powerhouse of grace, right?
I love it.
And here, heaven and earth are meeting. It's amazing.
Thank you. Beautiful. We both shared the common education, a very unique curriculum at our college, Thomas Aquinas College, a great books college, and we both share in the priesthood. Maybe you could just say a little bit about this unique kind of education that you got at Thomas Aquinas College, what that was about, and then how that influenced your priesthood now by that kind of education that you received.
Wow, that's a big question. It was such a question, or an education. There's the whole expression of ressourcement, returning to the fonts of our tradition. And through the great books education, it really brought us and taught us to drink directly from so many tremendous sources of our tradition, and to let our minds and hearts be formed by those sources. So in many ways, it especially helped me. We live, to take one example, okay, is after my baptism, a few years after my baptism, I was talking with somebody on an acquaintance, and we were having some argument about religion, and then he said, well, in the end, it's all just a bunch of atoms. And I sort of looked at him dumbfounded. I had absolutely no answer for that. I'm sure that that's not right. You know, but my faith is sufficient to tell me that's not right. But I couldn't. Because everything I've been taught basically said, well, yeah, that's what reality is. A bunch of atoms, right?
Just atoms.
Yeah. And so you have that. It's not it's not science the problem. It's that view that science is the only real knowledge, right? And there's no other way of knowing anything about reality. And that just exaltation, glorification of science, the faith of science, the creed of science, right? And some people even speak that way. I believe in science. And that's kind of contrary to what I thought you were supposed to be proving things through science. And so the education at Thomas Aquinas College really helped break the mind out of that prison and really enter into that fuller contact with reality. And Pope Benedict XVI, and even already before when he was Cardinal Ratzinger, but especially in that famous address at Regensburg, Germany,
Sure.
that and caused all sorts of problems in the Muslim movement. People missed the real point of that, because that's precisely what he was getting. He was in that talk speaking about the history of how human reason had been truncated in its scope in the Western world. And so much of this dichotomy and conflict we have today between faith and science is the result of that truncation of the scope of reason. And the human reason needs to be able to learn to open itself out again to the full scope of reality, including God. And that's something that the education in Thomas Aquinas College was so powerful in doing, not just in a quick sort of nice, smart argument way, but through 4 years of patient and serious studying and being able to.
But how would it do that through? What was the pathway through those?
Well,
4 years?
we had and you know that pathway. You went through it.
I want to hear you say
but
it.
yeah, in a way, the great books, you talk about great books program, that wasn't so much the pathway as really the patient tutorials that they have in philosophy, in the studies, actually the study of good old-fashioned Aristotle in philosophy, with the patient really, the way, not just having the answers given to you, but the way we had to think through and work through things, with the guidance of the instructors, and the collaborative effort of the students also was an amazing thing there, because you realized that the pursuit of truth and understanding truth was a joint effort.
Not me just trying to learn my own thing.
It's really, when we got to studying Descartes, it was all of a sudden you had this view of, Descartes literally quite literally locked himself in a hot room, overheated room in the middle of the winter, piled in bed beneath tons of covers, and began his thinking. So this, and his thinking is the mind isolated itself, the individual mind isolated itself. And so, with my experience at Thomas Aquinas College, with a lot of perspectives of modern philosophy, I was going, boy, this is really strange. It's like you're just by yourself there. There's no contact between human beings. There's no real communication with anybody else. It's just all purely your thought that you're throwing out there. I think, therefore I am, and it's all inside of me, right? And so that comment, but I sort of sidetracked there, right? But it is the common study of reality with Aristotle as a guide, but thinking through things yourself, discussing with one another, and then also when we entered in and saw the presentation of Thomas Aquinas, and we just had some key selections from it that we delved into there in the school, but again we worked through those very carefully thought through the arguments, discussed them, and we'd been prepared for them, at least in the philosophical level, by what we learned from Aristotle, or studies of Aristotle. So that was really the core of it, what makes it unique. But we also, as you know, the whole aspect of the science, we didn't we grappled with the sciences, not in their latest endeavors, but the way we looked at just the whole original, first proponents of the scientific revolution and their work, and studied them, and saw how they approached things, and saw both what they were able to accomplish and the limitations in their thought, the way we together asked questions of them and so forth, all that.
So fast forward now to St. Peter's Church, when your regular run-of-the-mill everyday efforts, how do you feel like that education at Thomas Aquinas College that we both shared somehow how has it affected your priestly ministry?
I think it's been very positive. I mean, it took lots of personal maturation over the years as well, but people have questions, okay? And people don't just want, well, sometimes they pretend to want easy answers, right? They want the quick answer they can put in their pocket, run off with. But it gives you the ability to hear the questions that people are coming to you with, and as a priest, they come to you with all sorts of questions, and be able to respond to them from that whole wealth that you've received, even when, okay, because, even when I have parishioners who are illiterate or semi-literate, right? But even then, I feel better equipped to respond to them, even though I have that, that huge education gap, right? Having the education that I've had. I'm able to, the pastor's supposed, one of the images of the pastor is the prophetic role is the watchman, okay? And as the watchman then, with that education, you're able to have that vigilance to see the danger and the dangers that people in their ordinary day-to-day life might not perceive. We have that role. We have to have that vigilance. And if we're not educated ourselves, then we don't have that view of all the different influences that are out there and where they're coming from in many ways.
Wonderful. What's your biggest challenge as a priest in 2016, the year that we're here recording?
The biggest challenge, okay, and it actually kind of comes back to this, is getting anything to stick in our ephemeral day-to-day culture. And our culture I've read some articles about it, and I've seen this, but as I said, I have a school, so I work with children. Right, okay. So I see this already. It's a Catholic school, but Catholic school, we're sharing textbooks, and it's possible to separate all that from just what's going on in the general culture. And for example, there's a fundamental distinction. I think I remember from back when I was growing up, going to high school and so forth, between fact, which is proven, i.e. science, okay, and opinion, which is everything else, and the fact gets restricted to that. As it empirically proven. So actually, if you think about it, wait a minute, God's just been excluded from the realm of fact. Any moral truth's been excluded from the realm of fact. And really, our culture, people are imbibing this at a very early age in our culture. So G.K. Chesterton once said something along the lines that the modern age has helped make done this marvelous thing of making the self-evident seem implausible. Okay, so something, it's not exact quote, but it's something along those lines. And you see, because precisely because children are just absorb what's given to them and don't have that ability to process and discern yet, when you're trying to instruct them and guide them and form them in the faith, and they're already starting to view reality through this lens of fact and opinion,
that's been the biggest challenge.
I'm giving an example of how the culture, just a real radical way, the culture can be a big challenge, because and I see it in especially middle school age, where you end up getting a sort of confusion, and so some will go in a real fundamentalist direction, and by fundamentalist, really, they know their faith, so they're going to hold fast to their faith. They'll be scared of all the rest because they'll see that's threatening it, but they won't really have any reason. Their mind's not developed because according to what they've been taught about knowledge, it's either faith or science. So they start moving towards rejecting the science. Okay? Or the others, well, it's what you can prove scientifically by experiment. And going on that side of it, then, well, the rest of that's just opinion. Oh, yeah, some of this is neat and I like it and it's cool or something like that, but finally it's just opinion. And one opinion is as good as the other.
And I suppose these aren't just challenges of the West Coast, but the East
Yeah,
Coast as well.
That's all around,
everywhere
yeah.
between. And we thank God for the gift of your vocation. And as our own time winds down here, I just want to say words to our viewers to thank them for watching this program here with us on Catholic Peekskill. And before we ask Father Levine to give a final blessing, we always want to offer you a warm welcome to visit us at Assumption Church in Peekskill, whether you are a daily massicant or someone who comes to Mass every day or someone's been a long way away from church. We hope that you'll find a real home in our church. Visit our website, AssumptionPeekskill.org, and you'll see a lot of the great events that are coming up at our church. And when you do, I hope you'll tap me on the shoulder and say, hey, I saw you and I saw Father Levine on Catholic Peekskill. So, Father Levine, maybe you could just close out by giving our viewers a 30-second blessing.
Okay.
Stay seated.
Oh, I'm used to standing up for a blessing.
Sorry.
Okay. Through the intercession of the Immaculate Virgin Mary, St. Joseph, St. John the Baptist, St. John the Evangelist, St. Michael, St. Gabriel, St. Raphael, may Almighty God bless you, the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen.
Thank you for watching us on Catholic Peekskill. We'll see you next time. God bless you and good night.
Hosanna in excelsis,